When you look at a medical chart or, a scientific report or
Mm,
even a legal contract, you really expect absolute, uncompromising precision. Like, you want the text to operate like a math equation.
exactly. Just pure facts.
Yeah, a word points to a specific thing in the real world, and well, that's just the end of the story. But what if the exact same biological or physical facts could be written in two completely different ways?
Ways that actually, manipulate your judgment.
Right. Ways that can alter a jury's verdict or fundamentally change the quality of care a patient receives. So today's stack of sources is curated specifically for those of you prepping for the TEAS and HESI nursing entrance exams.
But really, the mechanics we're going to explore here, they apply to anyone who interacts with language.
Totally. We're diving deep into literal versus implied meaning. We're tearing apart the concepts of denotation and connotation.
It's such a foundational topic. And really, our mission for this deep dive is to explore why the dictionary definition of a word is often the absolute least important thing about it.
Wow, the least important.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We want to look under the hood of human communication, right? Dissect how writers and speakers actually instruct you on how to feel about a fact without ever actually changing the fact itself.
Okay, let's unpack this. Oh, wait, no ellipses. Let me restart that. Okay, let's unpack this because what we are talking about goes so far beyond high school English class.
It really does.
To understand how language manipulates us, we have to start with the basic mechanics. What are the actual nuts and bolts of a word? Let's define these two terms, specifically in the rhetorical and literary sense that standard exams test.
Well, let's start with denotation. At its core, denotation is the literal, verifiable dictionary meaning of a word.
So just the strict definition.
Exactly. It's the physical thing, the strict category, or the concept that the word points to in the real world, completely stripped of any emotional baggage.
Got it.
It answers the most basic question you can ask of a sentence, which is, what does this refer to?
So it's the verifiable payload and then connotation.
Right, so connotation is the invisible cargo that's attached to that payload. You have the emotional charge, the cultural association, and the implied moral judgment that just rides along with a literal meaning.
Okay, that makes sense.
If denotation is, what does this refer to? Connotation answers the question, what does this make you feel or assume? Take the word snake as a baseline example.
Right. If we look at the denotation, a snake is a limbless reptile of the suborder Serpentes.
Very scientific.
Yeah, I mean, it's a biological fact, it's checkable and dictionary stable.
But language rarely operates in a sterile laboratory. If you refer to a person as a snake,
Oh, yeah.
you are obviously not making a biological comment on their vertebral column or their lack of limbs.
Right, you're not calling them a literal reptile.
Exactly. You are invoking the connotation. You're activating this whole cultural payload of betrayal, deceit, and hidden danger. It's the exact same literal word, but you have bypassed the dictionary entirely.
You're communicating entirely through the implied emotional layer. Let's look at a more subtle example from the sources, because this is where it starts to feel a bit like a magic trick. Consider a ladder of adjectives that all share the exact same denotation.
Okay.
The words are slender, thin, skinny, and scrawny.
That's a great list.
Right,
Yeah.
because every single one of those words denotes the exact same physical property, a person with below average body mass.
The biological reality is identical across the board. Yet the writer's choice among those four words, it acts as an instruction manual for the reader's emotions.
How so? Break that down.
Well, think about it. Slender implies grace and elegance, right? It functions as a compliment.
Yeah, you want to be called slender.
Exactly. Then thin is essentially neutral. It's just a clinical statement of fact.
Right.
But then skinny begins to tilt into mildly negative, maybe informal territory. And scrawny,
Oh, scrawny is definitely bad.
yeah, it implies weakness, frailty, or malnourishment. So when you encounter these words on a reading comprehension exam, the key is recognizing that the writer isn't just delivering a fact about a body.
They're smuggling in an attitude.
Yes, exactly.
It makes me think of a Trojan horse. Like, the denotation is the wooden horse itself. It gets past the guards of your logical brain because it is technically, factually accurate.
Oh, that's good.
But the connotation is the army of soldiers hiding inside. It smuggles in the emotional and moral judgments once the word is already inside your mind.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it.
Okay.
The guards only check the dictionary definition.
Right, they just let the word in.
But the connotated soldiers are what actually conquer the reader's perception. And that dynamic is precisely why this concept leaves the English classroom and creates massive real-world consequences.
Especially if you're stepping into a field like healthcare or law.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, let's transition into those real-world stakes because the sources provide some fascinating case studies on how this plays out in society.
They really do.
Let's look at real estate and social infrastructure. Take the words house versus home. Denotatively, they refer to the exact same physical structure: four walls, a roof, a foundation.
Yet they operate in entirely different spheres.
Yeah.
I mean, you use the word house in a structural or financial context.
Or on a real estate listing.
Right, or a construction contract, a tax document. It is neutral. But home carries profound connotation. It signals warmth, belonging, safety, familial attachment.
Yeah, it feels completely different.
And notice how this shapes public policy language. The sources highlight that English didn't adopt the term houseless. We use the word homeless.
Oh, wow. Because saying someone is houseless just points to a lack of a physical building. It feels, I don't know, administrative.
Exactly.
Saying they're homeless is specifically built to evoke the emotional stakes and the tragedy of losing a place of belonging. The language evolved to maximize the connotative empathy.
Which brings us directly into the healthcare connection. This is vital for you to understand if you are entering the medical field.
Right, for all the TEAS and HESI prep folks listening.
There is a massive documented push across the industry right now toward what we call person-first language.
Okay, what does that look like in practice?
So instead of a practitioner writing down an obese patient, they're now trained to write a person with obesity.
Oh, okay.
Or instead of calling someone an addict, the standard is now a patient who uses substances.
I want to break down the mechanism of what is happening there because the underlying clinical facts, the denotations, they're exactly the same in both phrases.
100% identical.
The biological reality hasn't shifted an inch, but the structure of the phrase changes everything.
It changes the cognitive priming. When a clinician uses a label like an obese patient, the condition modifies the person. The connotation implies that the disease is their primary identity.
Oh, that makes sense. It puts the disease first.
And studies show that this subtle linguistic framing fundamentally affects patients' stigma. It affects how patients perceive themselves, and incredibly, it affects the quality of care they receive.
Wait, really? The actual care?
Yes. Medical professionals presented with condition-first language statistically demonstrate lower empathy and are more likely to attribute the patient's health issues to personal failure.
That is staggering. The exact same clinical fact, presented with a slightly different connotative outfit, actually alters a medical treatment plan.
It does. Person-first language attempts to strip away that negative emotional halo. By placing the human being before the condition, the language forces the reader's brain to prioritize the person.
It reduces the connotative baggage.
Exactly.
And obviously, people who want to sell us things understand this cognitive priming perfectly. Advertisers are like the ultimate masters of the connotative Trojan horse.
Oh, they definitely are.
We see this when a car dealership sells a pre-owned vehicle instead of a used vehicle, or a coffee shop sells an artisanal pastry instead of a handmade one. But let me push back slightly.
Sure.
Is there actually a functional difference, or are advertisers just lying to us? So it's not that used and pre-owned mean different things. It's that one makes you feel like a savvy buyer and the other makes you feel cheap.
Well, they are not lying denotatively. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the genius of a euphemism. Euphemisms manipulate connotation while strictly preserving denotative truth. The vehicle absolutely had a previous owner, but used connotes wear, tear, and depreciation.
It makes the buyer feel like they are settling.
Exactly. Pre-owned connotes that the vehicle was merely possessed by someone else, almost like a curated antique. It makes the buyer feel sophisticated.
Such a subtle trick.
And the law relies heavily on this distinction as well.
Really? How so?
Consider contract law. If a contract stipulates a penalty for breaking a rule, judges are often reluctant to enforce it because the connotation of penalty implies punishment.
And punishment is usually reserved for the state, right?
Exactly. But if the exact same dollar amount is labeled a liquidated damages fee, it sounds like a neutral compensatory business calculation.
And let me guess, courts enforce those.
Routinely.
Yeah.
The money is the same. The trigger is the same. The connotative framing changes the legal outcome.
Wow. If advertisers use this gap between meaning and feeling to sell us cars, and lawyers use it to enforce contracts, how do governments use it to sell us conflicts?
That's where things get really dark.
Yeah, if politicians can temporarily bend a word's connotation, it feels like this goes from commercial manipulation straight into political doublespeak.
And Orwell took this exact concept and explored its most dangerous applications. In his 1946 essay, Politics in the English Language, George Orwell critiqued a mechanism we now call doublespeak.
Right, the idea of making lies sound truthful.
Exactly. He argued that political language is often designed to make lies sound truthful and murder sound respectable by exploiting that very gap between denotation and connotation.
So how does the mechanism of doublespeak actually work in practice?
It works by intentionally selecting words whose denotation is technically factually accurate, but whose connotation is so sterile that it completely anesthetizes the reader to the reality of the situation.
Give me an example from the sources.
The sources point to the classic military phrase, collateral damage.
Ah, right. Denotatively, collateral damage means civilian deaths and the destruction of non-military property during an operation. It is a factually accurate description of events, but connotatively, it sounds like a bureaucratic accounting error.
It sounds like an insurance term.
Yeah, it strips away all the emotional weight, the grief, and the horror that the plain phrase civilian deaths would automatically carry.
And the sources bring up an even more specific and intense debate from recent history to illustrate this. The battle between the terms enhanced interrogation and torture.
Oh, that was a huge deal.
It was a massive editorial dilemma for the American press in the 2000s, specifically highlighted by Clark Hoyt, who was the public editor for the New York Times in 2009.
Right, because after the post-9/11 detention programs became public, news organizations had to figure out what to call practices like waterboarding.
And the government heavily preferred the phrase enhanced interrogation techniques.
Because look at the mechanics of that phrase. It denotes the physical acts being performed, so it isn't a direct lie.
But it entirely strips out the connotation of illegality, cruelty, and human rights violations.
Enhanced interrogation sounds procedural. It sounds authorized.
Meanwhile, human rights organizations and legal scholars use the word torture, which carries a massive connotative and legal payload.
Right.
Hoyt wrestled publicly with the newspaper's reluctance to use the word torture. He realized that choosing between those two terms wasn't just a stylistic preference.
By choosing a sterile euphemism, the paper was inadvertently adopting a specific connotative stance.
Yes, which had massive moral consequences.
It is the ultimate real-world application of the old aphorism, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter.
Exactly.
The exact same denoted action an individual using violence against a state for a political cause receives opposite connotative labels depending entirely on the political alignment of the speaker.
That's spot on.
And I really need to pause here for a second to explicitly state to you, the listener, that we are impartially reporting our sources' analysis of the language mechanics in these historical examples.
Absolutely.
We are absolutely not taking a political stance on any of these events, practices, or terms. We are simply examining how the linguistic engine is built.
That is a crucial distinction. We are studying the physics of the engine, regardless of who is driving the car.
Right. But here's where it gets really interesting, though. If the literal action, the denotation, is perfectly identical in these cases, doesn't that mean that a news outlet's choice of dictionary-accurate words is actually a moral judgment in disguise?
That is the inescapable conclusion. True linguistic neutrality might actually be a myth.
Wow.
Word choice is never neutral. And that is exactly why reading comprehension exams, like the TEAS or the HESI, test this concept so heavily.
They're not just testing vocabulary.
No, they are testing your ability to detect the invisible moral judgments, the biases, and the attitudes that the author is smuggling into the text via that Trojan horse of connotation.
Okay, so if politicians and advertisers can temporarily bend a word's connotation, can a culture permanently break a word's denotation? Like, we are the ones packing the emotional baggage into these words, so neither denotation nor connotation can actually be set in stone, right?
They are entirely fluid. Language is nothing more than a living, breathing consensus. Let's talk about the mechanism of semantic shift.
Which is when the supposedly fixed dictionary definition, the denotation itself, drifts and changes over time.
Exactly.
The sources have some wild historical examples of this. How does a word actually lose its literal meaning and adopt a new one?
It usually happens through a slow process of ironic usage, habituation, and eventually generational amnesia.
Generational amnesia, I like that.
Take the word nice. Today, its primary denotation is something pleasant, agreeable, or kind. But if we trace its etymological journey, it comes from the Latin word nescius, which meant ignorant.
Wait, really?
Ignorant.
Yeah. And then in Middle English, it meant foolish or stupid.
That is an unbelievable pivot. How do you get from ignorant to pleasant?
Over centuries, the culture essentially walked the word across the dictionary. It went from meaning foolish to shy to fastidious and fussy to refined and finally to pleasant.
So society just collectively forgot the old definition and agreed on a new one. Precisely. The sources give another great example with the word awful. Historically, it literally meant inspiring awe. It was a highly positive term used to describe majestic, divine things.
And now its denotation is simply terrible or very bad.
Exactly.
And more modern example from the sources is the word gay. For centuries, the primary denotation was merry, bright, or carefree.
Right.
But over the course of the 20th century, everyday subcultural usage shifted the word's primary denotation to mean homosexual, leaving the older meaning as a secondary, mostly archaic footnote in the dictionary.
Which completely reframes how you have to look at a dictionary, right?
Yeah, it's not a rule book for how we have to speak. It's just a history book recording how people spoke yesterday.
What's fascinating here is that this is one of the most common hurdles for students. People view denotation as this permanent universal law of physics.
But it isn't.
No. It is a temporary agreement among the people speaking the language.
And if the literal meaning is that unstable, the connotation must be even more fragile. The sources describe a phenomenon called cultural inversion, where the emotional payload of a word flips completely depending on where you are in the world.
Yes, the classic example here is the dragon.
Right.
The dragon perfectly illustrates how connotation is bound by geography. Denotatively, in both Chinese and Western traditions, the word refers to the exact same concept, a mythical, powerful reptilian creature.
The reference points to the same object.
But in Chinese tradition, the dragon connotes imperial power, good fortune, and celestial legitimacy. It is deeply revered.
While in Western tradition, heavily influenced by stories like St. George slaying the dragon, it connotes danger, greed, and demonic evil.
The exact same denoted object carries the exact opposite emotional valence. It proves that connotation is not an inherent property of the object. It is a projection of the culture.
This constant shifting the dictionary, moving under our feet, cultures inverting emotional payloads, it brings us to the deepest, most mind-bending question of this whole deep dive.
Oh, here we go.
Is the line between denotation and connotation even real? Or did we just invent it to make ourselves feel better about the instability of language?
This raises such an important question. To answer it, we have to look at the deep intellectual roots of these terms. This split between literal and implied meaning wasn't just invented by a grumpy English teacher with a red pen.
Right. The sources trace this back to 1843 to the philosopher John Stuart Mill.
Yes. Mill was writing a comprehensive system of logic. He needed a mathematical way to evaluate if arguments were valid.
So what did he do?
He split a term into two parts. Its reference the physical thing it points to in the world, and its sense the implied attributes of that thing.
And the incredible trivia here is that Mill's original version of connotation had absolutely zero to do with emotion.
Not at all.
Yeah.
In his strict logic system, connotation only meant the logical attributes a word implies. So the word white connotes the logical attribute of whiteness, while it denotes all the white objects that exist in the world.
So our modern idea of emotional baggage was a much later literary adaptation.
Exactly. And then the philosopher Gottlob Frege pushed this even further in 1892 with his famous example of the morning star and the evening star.
Okay, remind me how that one works.
Frege's example is brilliant because it explains the mechanism of how we perceive truth. Both the morning star and the evening star denote the exact same physical object, the planet Venus.
Right, the reference is identical.
But ancient astronomers didn't know they were the same object because one appeared at dawn and the other at dusk. They experienced them differently.
Therefore, the two terms have completely different senses or connotations. The cognitive path to the object is different, even if the destination is the same.
Exactly. But the real philosophical earthquake happens with Roland Barthes in 1957.
Oh, this is the semiotics part.
Yes. He takes modern semiotics, which is the study of signs and symbols, and basically shatters this entire binary framework.
Because Barthes argued that the very concept of denotation is an illusion, right?
He did. He claimed that denotation isn't a neutral, innocent, objective baseline. Instead, what we call denotation is simply a connotation that a culture has stopped noticing.
That is a lot to process. How does a connotation just stop being noticed?
Barth has called it naturalized ideology. Think about the concept of jaywalking.
Okay.
Today, we accept the denotation of jaywalking as a natural, objective legal fact, crossing a street unlawfully.
Sure, it's just a crime.
But historically, that concept was a connotative smear campaign invented by the automotive industry in the 1920s.
Wait, really? To blame pedestrians?
Yes, to blame pedestrians for accidents and clear the roads for cars. They attached a negative connotation to walking in the street. Over decades, society habituated to it, forgot the origin, and accepted it as a literal dictionary fact.
The connotation calcified into denotation.
Exactly.
So to put it in exam terms, denotation is just connotation that won the popularity contest and got tenure.
I love that. That is a brilliant way to synthesize it.
Oh.
Post-structuralist thinkers argued exactly that. Dictionaries are not holy texts handed down from the sky.
They are written by human beings embedded in a specific culture, carrying the biases, power dynamics, and history of that culture.
There is no purely objective view from nowhere.
So if denotation is just calcified cultural consensus, what does this mean for you, the listener? Say you are a nursing student and you are reading a medical chart written in 1990 versus one written in 2024.
It means you have to read the chart as a historical document, not just a biological one.
Right.
The medical terminology used in 1990 reflects the cultural consensus and the hidden biases of 1990. The terms we consider objective today will likely be viewed as laden with outdated connotations 30 years from now.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the biological mechanics of a snake to healthcare labels to Roland Barthes. Let's synthesize this for the listener. Give me the rapid-fire exam-style takeaways.
All right, here are your core principles. 1. Denotation is the literal dictionary payload. Connotation is the emotional, cultural baggage that rides along with it.
Yeah.
2. Words can share the exact same literal denotation but differ wildly in their connotation, instructing the reader on how to feel.
The slender versus scrawny ladder.
Exactly. 3. Neither is permanent. Denotations shift over time through semantic change, and connotations invert across different cultures.
And the last one.
Number 4. Word choice is never, ever neutral.
So what does this all mean? How do you take these concepts out of the exam room and apply them to your daily life? Well, earlier we discussed euphemisms, how we use softer words like passed away instead of died to make a harsh reality easier to swallow by changing the connotation.
Right.
But the sources introduced a neighboring concept that I want to leave you with.
Dysphemisms.
Dysphemisms. It operates as the exact opposite of a euphemism. It is the practice of deliberately substituting a neutral word for a harsher, more offensive one.
Give an example.
Like saying someone croaked instead of saying they died. The denotation remains completely identical. The biological fact is that the person is no longer living.
But the dysphemism is explicitly designed to shock, to degrade, or to demonstrate a profound lack of respect.
Right. It is a linguistic weapon designed to force a negative emotional reaction.
Exactly.
So here is my challenge for you as you move through the rest of your week. Listen critically to your own conversations. Pay attention to your friends, your colleagues, and the media you consume. Are you using dysphemisms?
Are you subtly expressing a harsh moral judgment while hiding behind the excuse that you are just stating literal facts?
Because remember how we started this deep dive?
The expectation of absolute precision in a medical chart or a scientific report?
We desperately want the words we read to function like an X-ray, a clean, objective, binary picture of reality. But language isn't an X-ray.
No, it's a painting.
And every single word is a brushstroke chosen by someone who wants you to see the world exactly the way they do. Keep questioning the words around you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and we will catch you next time.